I met a child who in her first grade was stealing food to eat. I mean, that kind of stuff happens. And when you tell the story, when you're saying this right now, there's a part of me that says, you know what, it's hard to believe that people or kids are having to learn that.
Right.
But you were very self-reliant.
Right.
Also, he had a woman at the CP school, and she is still in his life. Her name is Inga Horowitz. She lives in Richmond, Virginia, and she was the occupational therapist at the school. And
It's a special school.
she has known Jim since he was 4 or 5 years old. And she said, Lori, I started taking notes on him and his life. She has bought him things. She was very excited when we were married and had our children. We saw her this summer. We went to visit her, and she is just so amazed, knowing his background.
Right. And what you went through as a child. Man. So what, was your mom, did you get any kind of Christianity, any kind of that growing up?
No, when I was small, I only heard about God in a negative way as far as the swearing and that kind of thing.
Right.
No Christian training or anything. So I didn't have, I really admire people that have, the Christian home, and I'm glad, that everybody doesn't have to go through what I did.
Yeah, because sometimes when I started listening to kind of more normal lives, when I heard people talking about, being loved and being like wrapped up and held as a baby or loved on as a little kid, there were part of me that would just tear up and say, I wonder what that feels like.
Right.
And that's the same with you, is I wonder what that feels like, because you didn't know.
Well, your mom loved you.
Oh, definitely.
She loved you. But then he was raised by foster care.
So how did you get in foster care?
When I was about 8 years old,
And mother left.
And my mother
Was arrested.
My mother and stepfather were arrested. After they figured out that I was by myself, then they put me in foster care.
Okay.
Right.
And then what were your foster folks like?
Most of them were very nice, and I think they did the best they could. I don't want to, make anyone think that they were all bad or anything like that. But I really never felt part of the family.
When you say most of them, so you were more than one foster family?
Right, about 8.
About 8?
Yes.
Oh, shut up.
So I had difficulty.
You poor thing. I want to just grab you and say, oh, I'm so sorry. Because there's a part of me that says, God does have to come in and change a lot of things, but the damage that happens to a child that is not loved and passed around and not belonging, I think is absolutely huge. There is something that is so to the core of who you are that doesn't get nurtured or fed.
Right.
How did you survive those?
Well, I think that God gave me a strong constitution and determination. I think that's the only way to explain it.
Right. That somehow He poured into you survival skills.
Right.
Yeah.
Now I have to admit that there were times when I had pity parties and
depression, any of that?
Right,
did you go through
depression,
that as a kid?
having mixed feelings about myself and about my future, wondering how I was going to get past my past, and knowing that my future looked bleak.
Right.
Based on.
So with that, how did you get to a point where things started turning around for you?
Okay. Well, when I was about 16 and I'd gone through all these foster homes, they ran out of places to put me. So they transferred me from county care to state care.
Oh, ouch. How come that does not sound good to me?
It's not. And because when you go into state care, they have to process you, and you go through detention center, what kids would know today as juvie.
Right. And you were not a juvie kid.
No.
They just didn't know where to put you.
I fell through the cracks, basically. Right. I was basically a good kid, but they didn't have anywhere else to put me. They didn't have anywhere to put good kids.
Yeah.
And so they processed me by putting me through juvie, and then some of these other institutions.
Inga did.
She had.
Is that the woman at the CP
right.
school?
And to me, as far as human people goes, humans rather,
right.
She is definitely a hero to me.
She's like an angel.
Oh, she is. And so anyway, when I was at one of these places, I'm going to get teared up here. But anyway, I was at one of these places. she found out about it, and she was so alarmed that I was in this institution that she contacted one of the people that she knew was a lawyer or a counselor or something, and he started trying to pull some strings and get me out of there and to get me into a halfway house and that kind of thing. So.
And this is a teacher.
She was an occupational
Occupational
therapist.
therapist.
Wow.
Right. So there were people along the way that.
So when you see her, tell her that we all love her.
Oh, I sure will.
But you know, it's interesting as you talk is that a lot of people in a number of ways fall through the crack. And so what you're saying is that because they didn't even know where to put you, is that you had experiences that you should have probably never had in your life. And on top of that, dealing with the cerebral palsy, dealing with the fact that your mom was not around.
Broken home and the drinking, the drugs. And on top of that, my stepfather was not only did he neglect us as a family, he was also very abusive.
Wow.
Physically and emotionally. And so I was a mess when God finally got my attention.
How did he get your attention? Because you know that's my favorite part of any story, because I know that God, there's a book called The Hound of Heaven, like God it stays on us like a hound. It's like he wants so desperately for us to turn around and see his face, because he says, I never let you go. I never let up. I so want to teach you that I'm here and have you turn to me. And so how did that happen in your life?
Well, I guess I grew up with the mentality that we have to, if we want anything in life, we're going to have to get it ourselves.
Oh, I'm sure.
That nobody owes, the world doesn't owe us anything.
Right. Nobody's going to do for you.
Right. If you want something done, you're going to have to do it yourself. And so it was kind of a pull yourself up by your own bootstraps kind of mentality. And when I got to be about 16, 17, when I'd gone through all these foster homes and gone through the institutions and state care and got into a halfway house and got a full-time job. And by this time, they'd already tried to reunite me with my mother, too. And that didn't work out because we had so many issues. Neither one of us had had any counseling of any kind.
Ouch.
And so we didn't know how to relate to each other. We were so much alike, but we had so much pain and so many issues that we didn't know how to deal with it. Or not only with ourselves, but with each other. So it was just a compound problem that we
And then there
weren't ready
was
for.
the stepfather, the second stepfather, that despised the ground Jim walked on.
That came later. He was very jealous of me.
Was it jealous of you, and then were you a lot of work because of the cerebral palsy? But
Not really.
so it wasn't that
But then
because
I
you
was-
had learned to take care of yourself
Right.
totally.
But I guess he was so attached to my mother that any time I took away,
It was an interference.
so it was an interference.
Wow.
But anyway, when I was about 16 or 17 and I'd gone through all these institutions, halfway house and everything, and an attempt to reunite with my mother, I was working in Pennsylvania by then in a processing plant. Here I am, a vegetarian, working in a meat processing plant.
How did you do that? It just made you more vegetarian.
Yeah, definitely.
oh, man,
I
I'm
could
not
tell
eating
you
that.
stories. I know there's probably folks saying, I'll never give up meat. If I could tell you stories, you would change your mind. So,
I heard some of the stories. They are disgusting. Okay,
Right.
go on with the story.
but I was working in a processing plant, and there was a girl there about my age, 16, 17 years old, named Debbie, that she was a member of the Mennonite church, and she started sharing Jesus with me.
Amen.
And what she was saying, just started sinking in, I guess. And
You know, Jim, I have to ask you this, because in my own life, when I started to realize from being such a neglected child and not loved that there is a God and He loves me, it was so cool. So when you started to realize there is a God and you can turn it over and you don't have to carry it all yourself, how did that feel?
it was awesome because I had a lot of issues, a lot of weight on my shoulders, And I was at the point, I came home one day from work. I worked a 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. shift. Can you imagine that?
Oh, man.
And I came home one morning after working, and I was sitting there on my bed in the dark and looking out the window and thinking I didn't really want to kill myself, but I was at the point where I didn't want to go on living the way I was.
I was done.
And I realized I'd tried everything as far as trying to take care of myself and trying to get past my problems and get over my hurts and all this. And I was like, I can't do any more. I've gone as far as I can go, and it's not good enough.